So please join me in welcoming on stage our moderator for this evening, Ryan Schwartz. Ryan is a licensed architect with nearly a decade of experience working across Canada in the public and private sectors. His recent work has focused on all aspects of residential projects at a variety of scales, and he is also active in the adjacent fields of architectural media and photography. Some of you may have already seen Ryan during our excellent plenary yesterday, which he helped kick off our conference. He's also the host of the OAA's forthcoming public-faced podcast series, Architecturally Speaking, where he chats with members of the profession about all facets of the built environment and its impacts on everyday life.
Thank you, Settimo. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the SHIFT 2023 Health and Architecture Challenge event. The OAA's SHIFT Challenge is a biennial awards program that began in 2019 as the SHIFT Infrastructure and Architecture Challenge. It's an aspirational program created to highlight the distinct contribution that architectural thinking brings to addressing key societal issues. As you might know, SHIFT invites Ontario architects, intern architects, architecture students, and their collaborative teams to respond to an identified area of concern using their valuable skills and insights. For this year's challenge, the chosen theme was health. Tonight, we're excited to share the 5 outstanding selections. In different ways, each of these selected proposals demonstrate the potential of architecture to shape our environment and to support our physical, mental, and social well-being. If you haven't yet, be sure to pick up one of the books at the back of the room, and they'll also be made digitally as well. From community-based solutions that prioritize mental health to rethinking transit-oriented neighborhoods, these honorees were selected by our jury of architects and health experts for showcasing the power of design thinking. These jury members came together at the OAA headquarters in February and selected the 5 projects that they felt best exemplified the SHIFT spirit. So thank you to the jury. We have Terry Montgomery, Dr. Michelle Wyndham-West, Dr. Terry Peters, Greg Gallucci, and Stephen Fong. So tonight we wanted to show you these ideas firsthand and meet the teams behind their designs. We'll introduce these projects separately and then have a bit of a chat here on stage with some questions and hopefully some questions from the audience as well. So up first, the first project is titled Finding Balance in the Landscape of Muskoka from a team led by architect Howard Rideout. Howard, please join us and come collect your award.
My idea for the SHIFT submission this year was to bring a project that I've been working on for 5 years now into the public realm. It's been kind of a secret project in my mind for a long time, since I was a child actually. And as my career moves into its 40th year, I wanted to begin to kind of work on something that was much more personal and involved aspects of my career that I wasn't kind of moving through in the professional life, in my day-to-day existence. So when the pandemic hit, I took something that I had already started and moved it into a totally different direction, which was much more emotive, much more personal, and much more hopefully engaging to other people. It's a big project. It's been 50-something years in my mind, and I've been thinking about it in the back of my mind as I kind of motored through my architectural career, but I wanted to kind of make sure that before I pass, I'm able to kind of move and get some of these things done.
So my submission is entitled Finding Balance in the Landscape of Muskoka and focuses on a wilderness preserve that I've been designing over the last 5 years. Along with the conventional architectural drawings, which detail the elements of the master plan for the park, and this is the site plan of the park, a portion of the park actually, the submission focuses on the charcoal illustrations I created during the COVID-19 lockdowns. These were produced to express the spirituality that I found as I immersed myself in the beauty of the landscape of Muskoka. Throughout the first 2 years of the pandemic, I was channeling the negative energy that I was experiencing all around me into the creation of these drawings, as I attempted to bring some light into the darkness. Later, as the pandemic restrictions loosened, my partner and I headed north to Muskoka, where we began to construct the trails on the property As well, we cleared the areas of the forest where the buildings and sculptural elements depicted in the drawings will eventually be constructed. I will read the text which I had included with my submission of drawings. As the effects of climate change transform the world's natural ecosystems in ways which we're only now beginning to comprehend, I've been imagining a landscape for both personal and societal reflection on the changes our planet's ecosystems will inevitably take. Numerous experts have already written of the mental stresses that many people are experiencing as they process the existential threat posed by climate change. They have expressed their very serious concerns about the future health of our planet and reflect upon the damaged world our children will grow to inhabit. For the last 5 years, I've been engaged in the creation of this wilderness preserve, depicted within the charcoal illustrations that are included with my submission. I've been imagining a landscape that can be a place of reflection and repose, one that celebrates the natural characteristics of this 200-acre forested property in Muskoka. While this project has been a personal exploration and one tied to maintaining my own mental and physical health throughout the pandemic, the landscape that I have master planned will evolve from its current state as a private retreat into a public one over time. This entry addresses the restorative effects of creating this project, both mentally as well as physically, as I have begun to build the first of many architectural elements upon this landscape. The creation of this master plan has been cathartic, and while the narrative is structured around my own family history and my personal journey to design the park, the themes that underline the project are universal. As I was creating these drawings, I was curious as to how others would respond to them. My intent was to bring them along my journey, both literally and metaphorically. This recognition from the OAA is as a positive affirmation that I may have succeeded. And so these are some of the drawings. This is the entrance into the park, and it's a kind of an oval space that it's actually built, but we were only allowed to have 7 slides, so I'm only show drawings. And then on the left is a drawing of the oval and the visitor center for the park, which is also a cottage while I'm alive. And together they created an ankh, which is like the symbol of life on the horizon, on the forest canopy. And then as those 2 spaces are illuminated by fires or by the illumination from the cottage, you get that, in the second image, you get that in the sky. And then you get a series of the landscape features. And then on the right is a sculptural installation that I'll be building eventually on the site. Here I create a section through the oval, which is on the left, and you see the light kind of spilling out into the sky. And some smoke coming out of the oval. And then when I created this drawing, I wanted it to be kind of, how could I illuminate it? And I just thought of all these people having flashlights. And so in that sectional drawing on the top, you can kind of see the light kind of moving through people. And the light actually points to the direction where I want you to kind of imagine the process of moving. So when you get to the bridge, and you'll see that in the very middle, there's that little dip down in that thing. You see the lights going both ways, because I kind of imagine that people get that point where they allow themselves to kind of ponder what's around while they're on the bridge. And from the images on the very bottom, from left to right, is the oval as I created it in 2019. So that was before the pandemic. So all the pandemic drawings came from interpreting that, because I wasn't actually allowed to visit it. And the second drawing is a piece called the Genesis Grotto, and it kind of recalls the kind of earlier garden elements of a grotto, but it's also the first element as you enter into the landscape. The third image is a picture of the actual stream that's the center of that section. And the fourth image is of this piece called the Diana Monument, which kind of structures another kind of series of movement up through into the sacred realm of the park. And then once you get there, there's 4 kind of sculptural installations that I've dedicated to my parents. And there's a long story there, but on the left is a piece called Gatekeeper Bridge as you enter this space. And then the middle piece are 2 sculptural installations that are across the lake. And the third piece on the right is a piece called Whaleback Rock, which I'm dedicated to my father. And this project I was talking about today at the convention, it took me a good hour to get it out. So I only have 5 minutes, but that's it. But that's my presentation for today.
Thank you very much, Howard. The second project tonight is titled Healthy Cities, Sustainably Adapting the Dominion Foundry Complex by student associate Erica Gomirato. Erica, join us on stage.
My submission for the SHIFT Challenge is adapted from my thesis project and focuses on the sustainable adaptive reuse of the historic Dominion Wheel and Foundry building complex in the West Donlands of downtown Toronto to promote health and wellness. So when I originally began thinking about my thesis project, I knew that I wanted to tackle the issue of sustainability and create a project that could positively contribute to the environment to mitigate the effects of climate change and to promote a healthier future. And then I was introduced to the Dominion Foundry buildings when considering a site. And at the time, the buildings were facing their own share of issues and were in danger of being completely demolished despite their heritage status. So I recognized that this offered an opportunity for my project to present sustainable adaptive reuse as a solution to preserving heritage buildings and the unique culture that they hold, while also integrating new sustainable construction that directly complements and works with the existing structures to give back to the city and connect the community.
Thank you. So my proposal is adapted directly from my master's thesis project advised by Shannon Bassett and addresses this year's SHIFT Challenge theme by sustainably adapting the historic Dominion Foundry site in the West Donlands of downtown Toronto. So the Dominion Foundry buildings are a complex of heritage buildings with significant importance to its community. And I chose this site for several reasons, but the reason that really solidified my choice was the media attention the buildings were receiving at the beginning of 2021. And this is when the province began demolishing the existing foundry building on site to make way for a new high-density housing complex. So the community created a movement that was successful at stopping the province from demolishing these buildings and really emphasized the significance that these buildings hold in our communities. And moving forward, the two remaining buildings on site, the foundry building and machine shop, are now required to be preserved in any future development. So this presented an opportunity to design a project that presents sustainable adaptive reuse as a solution to preserving and respecting our existing heritage buildings and their unique culture, while also integrating new sustainable construction to create a healthier city and a self-sustaining connected community. So my project addresses health and wellness from the city scale by connecting to proposed and existing infrastructure such as the Corktown Common Park and the revitalization of the Don River and Portlands, to the scale of a single living unit by providing flexible live-work units for a healthy balance between living and working with space to support a variety of healthy activities. My design strategy ensured that the machine shop and foundry buildings were preserved and filled with community programs to best celebrate them. I began by working around the existing building footprints to create a main public realm through the heart of the site, while proposing secondary pedestrian paths and a pedestrian-only street to promote an active, inviting neighborhood. I introduced softscape on the ground level primarily through remediation mounds to actively cleanse the site soil of its past industrial pollutants. New sustainable residential buildings were placed on site to still allow the city to densify, and vegetation is further introduced to the vertical plane through an extensive wrapping of green roofs and walls integrated in the new residential construction. Communal programs introduced in the existing buildings can all be accessed from the main public realm and include a wide range of programs and plenty of flexible space to support various activities and adapt to future changes in community needs. The residential buildings can also be accessed from this public realm. However, the massing was largely placed above the ground plane to frame and allow the existing structures to stand on their own. And the ground floor therefore maintains porosity throughout the site and with the surrounding West Donlands. The roof design was also important to addressing health and sustainability. In addition to the green roofs created, the residents can also access private growing gardens. A portion of the roof also features a rooftop meadow designed specifically for non-human species to increase biodiversity and promote the health of all species who use the site while enjoying the benefits that result from reintroducing natural habitats in an urban environment. The roof design also integrates sustainable building systems with rooftop water towers also serving as a unique landmark feature for the site. The porosity and flexibility of the main public realm allows for its year-round use for different programs such as a market, an outdoor concert and movie, or the display of ice sculptures in the winter. The machine shop building integrates a rock climbing wall with an indoor market and urban agriculture to promote activeness and exercise while inviting all ages to use and enjoy the building. A co-work center adjacent to the indoor market will also promote collaboration and in-person interactions for an overall benefit on mental well-being. The education center located in the Foundry building is envisioned to display and celebrate the performance and overall sustainability of the site while actively educating others on sustainable practices and healthy lifestyles. It features a large building performance light display that will change over time and allow the community to visually understand how implementing these various systems can result in a healthy and high-performing building and encourage them to learn more about how they can make their own lifestyles healthier. The sustainable systems used in the project all also have a direct impact on a person's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. The creation of a local circular food economy is achieved through the use of rooftop and community gardens for the production of healthy food options that can then be supplied to the on-site restaurant or distributed to the community through the local market. Urban agriculture combined with the green roofs and wall systems offers several benefits as well, such as managing temperatures, improving our air quality, creating a noise buffer, and providing direct connections with nature for a significant benefit on physical and mental health and an improved comfort of living. Renewable strategies are utilized for the generation of energy and electricity through solar panels and vertical axis wind turbines. A circular water system is also proposed for the management of rainwater and wastewater. And this water system also supplies the green roofs and walls, which will in turn help to manually filter the rainwater and mitigate flooding. So through the project's sustainable systems and flexible design, it will create a cleaner environment and healthier lifestyle for all inhabitants of all species. A unique way of healthy living is promoted through the immersive experience of on-site users with these strategies and natural ecologies. The project demonstrates how adaptive reuse can respect local history while bringing the community together to transform into an inviting and exciting public space to be celebrated. It also demonstrates how the integration of sustainable construction with adaptive reuse of existing buildings can achieve a successful intersection of architecture and health through the thoughtful integration of strategies and programs that support healthy living. The proposed design can therefore result in a healthier living environment and lifestyle, a self-sustaining site, and a healthier city overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erica. Our third project tonight is titled Hospital Precinct Commons. It's led by a joint team, architect Gordon Stratford and Alison Lumby, the manager of landscape architecture and urban design at WSP. Congratulations, and please come and collect your award.
By the default of all this wonderful progress that medicine and health sciences have gone through, we've almost created this separation between people and what has historically always been our core sense of health and safety of the natural world.
Actually, SHIFT2023 started that down as a path, and that is learning from the pandemic. Has healthcare lost its way? And we were looking at this on a big scale. It was like it was becoming too internalized, and it was losing its connection, and the pandemic just really sort of brought that to home. We felt that health-focused architecture can't do it on its own. And it can only be as good as, in a sense, the landscape that it rests in. And when we looked at the history of healthcare in Toronto, and many of those hospitals, they started that way.
And those moments you have in hospital, you think, I really need somewhere to go to get away, to take that break, to come back to myself. And then, which leads into the conversation of, well, where do you go? Which led into the bigger conversation of, why do you have to get away? Why are we pulling out this idea of you have healthcare and then your escape and your relaxation or your respite? Why aren't they one and together?
Right, thank you. So when Gordon and I first got together and started talking about the SHIFT 2023 challenge, we were really inspired by our own personal experience in having loved ones receiving treatment in urban healthcare facilities and having that experience and encountering a lack of places to go to get that relief from what can be really overwhelming and heart-rending times and experiences. And that's for those receiving the care, their loved ones, and those providing the care.
Picking up on what Alison is talking about, what we started to do is we started to ask ourselves a series of questions. And having picked the site, the Hospital Road between Elm Street and College Street, University Avenue, the first question we asked is, what would happen if we actually got rid of University Avenue, but didn't? And so that became the beginning of the idea of a land bridge, the notion of bridging the divide that occurs where you have this world-class health and wellness hub and actually start to make it behave the way it really needs, the way people really need it to behave and to service people. We then moved on to the notion of, well, what would happen if we started to create the notion of healing gardens and pavilions? And the thought behind it was, what happens if we turn the healthcare institutions inside out? What happens if we bring them from outside of their walls and actually bring them into the community? And part of the reason behind that was not only for the healthcare institutions, but also for the communities surrounding. So we were trying to think on many different levels, high level and down to details, as you'll see in a minute. So the healing gardens and pavilions, the colored areas that you see on the diagram, are a series of healing gardens, a range of healing gardens, some of which are placed immediately adjacent to the hospital that has a relationship. So for instance, Sick Kids Hospital, the garden would be about children of all ages, children our age and children that are actually, young and small and impressionable. Also, what we wanted to do was we wanted to include pavilions. And the notion here that built form and landscape needed to work together. Each couldn't get there on its own, but together we could really start to move things. And then finally, on the side of the ripple effect, what we were questioning to ourselves and hoping was that in doing this, it would make a multiplying effect on healthcare in this particular area by pulling it out and making it part of the community. And at the same time, as the community around the hub, around this particular healthcare hub, is changing and becoming increasingly dense and is turning into a mixed-use community. So we felt that there were possibilities there, and we thought that we'd just brainstorm on that.
And so from there, we started to dive into how we might actually structure this, how it might be achieved. And working with that land bridge concept, key to us was maintaining accessibility, ease of movement, and that connectivity to make sure that we're actually really bringing that community together and connecting those disassociated medical facilities. We worked through various scenarios, arriving at a plan that dipped University Avenue below the current street level, allowing us to drape that landscape over the road while maintaining accessible routes and trails and spaces throughout. Longitudinally, along University Avenue, this dip creates these moments, these arrival moments at either end, allowing us the opportunity for really fantastic, iconic architectural statements as we arrive in this space as part of that land bridge structure. In cross-section, as shown here, we form a hierarchy of spaces, rising from active to passive as we move through that landform. At entry level, we have wide promenades and public spaces for social gathering and people watching, really core to making sure that we're feeling integrated and part of that community. As we move up those slopes, we have a diversity of different types of spaces, suitable for different forms of play, contemplation, and therapeutic uses, serving a wide variety of users and needs. At the top, we have our pavilions. These benefit from having those outward views and experience of being fully engaged in enriching landscape experience, while also preserving patient dignity and privacy by being elevated. It was very important to us that we consider every patient window, no matter where they are in the buildings, way up in the sky, as a vantage point into this landscape, and having those connections visually to this fantastic experience. We considered options to wrap the green treatment and continue it up and around the buildings, engaging those buildings, ensuring that everyone has that connection to nature. as well as providing direct links into this space through those elevated and overhead pedways.
And so you can start to see that we're melding together landscape and architecture together. And I'm just going to talk for a moment about the building elements, the architectural elements that we started to look at. And as we were doing this, we were realizing that this was something that we were really developing a passion for, because we could work at a very high level, urban design level, and broader, but we could also work down to the actual individual room, and then the different types of buildings that would go into the landscape and meld with the healing garden. And I'll just touch base on them. We had 3 types. We had pavilion, retreat, and shelter. Pavilion was the largest of all. What you see on the screen is an 8-room wing, and there were a series of them that were connected together along the ridge, the top ridge that Alison mentioned just a minute ago. Now, the intent behind those is that if it's for an inpatient who has reached the point where they are beginning the healing process, and it gives an option to the healthcare system in terms of a room that is different than the one that you might find in a typical hospital. This one is shallow and wide. The focus is all about access to natural light and view while maintaining the privacy. It's within the hospital precinct, and the inpatients, they're with their family, their friends, and they're also supported by the healthcare team. And we considered 8 rooms would be a nice, small, sort of social level, and then with each of those wings, we would include what we referred to as a porch. And as you can see in the elevation, it's on the ridge, it's well-treed. The notion is that you're bringing patients back into the community. They have their privacy, they have their security, but the healing is part of the community itself. Next, the retreats. The retreats are scattered throughout the commons, and they're associated with each of the different type of healing gardens. And while we're talking about the healing gardens, it's interesting that as we did our research and looked into the history of healing and nature as a pharmacy, the notion of an indigenous heritage in medicine and healing and wellness is a very strong possibility through all of these gardens. But the retreats were intended for inpatients, outpatients. They would be programs that would be set up by the healthcare units themselves, the institutions, and also community partners, but also available to the public. And then last but not least, the shelters themselves. And those are intended for 1 to 2 people. And we scattered those throughout the commons in all the different landscape settings. And the intent behind that was that 1 or 2 people could get together, a person could have a moment of solitude. And you can imagine that in the middle of University Avenue. If you know that avenue, that's a very hard thing to do. And so we wanted to make sure that those were scattered throughout. And those could be used by hospital staff taking a break, the general public just walking by, and then also people who were part of perhaps outpatient and other programs. And so the last images that we'll show you, and you'll notice that we've kept a lot of these images as just sort of rough sketches, because we were really wanting to give the feeling that it's a concept. And we wanted to leave it, when we submitted, as something that could be talked about and critiqued and then developed further. But I'll take you to the bottom left-hand corner. Before image, this is looking up University Avenue. You can see a lot of wide open lanes. And then the sketch that's immediately above it is the sort of the after. So what we're trying to do is basically say, if the traffic needs to be there, it's secondary. It's subservient to the notion of having this green commons wrap up and over. As you come up the street, you're actually at the corner of Elm and University Avenue. You're looking straight ahead, and that is one of the 2 public promenades. So you have that ability to move through the commons, even if you're not going to the hospital. If you're coming up from a subway, instead of going up the busy avenue, you are walking to the front door of hospitals on a park. And it changes the whole notion of what healthcare means to the community. And the sketches that are on the right-hand side are further sketches as part of our sort of studying. So we're really passionate about this. You can probably tell we spent a lot of hours on this, and we're really, really grateful to SHIFT2023 for giving us this opportunity to share it with you. And we look forward to comments. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alison and Gordon. Our fourth project tonight is titled Scaling Down, Shifting to Transit-Oriented Communities and Human Scale and Human Speed by Smart Density and Brookfield Properties, Municipality of Clarington. Accepting the award tonight is Mohcine Sadiq.
So we recently had an opportunity to design a new neighborhood near a future GO station. And with that, we wanted to address the way transit-oriented communities are being designed today. And one of the challenges that we found is that a lot of it is just oversized. We have this assumption for some reason that a tall building needs to sit on this massive podium that is not very nice to walk by, and it sits on this urban block and this really wide street. And a lot of them are actually very car oriented when most of the people there will use transit. And we wanted to question, how is that pedestrian friendly? So we wanted to take an opportunity to really put people first and cars last in our design. And we wanted to create a neighborhood that will feel different, especially in comparison to what is currently being designed as transit-oriented developments, and would feel different and will invite people to live there. It will be a very enjoyable environment to visit and to stay.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be here tonight. My name is Mohcine Sadiq. I'm an architectural designer at Smart Density, and for those who might not know, Smart Density is a very young firm who had the chance to receive the Best Emerging Practice Award last year, and it is also the third time that we received the SHIFT Award. And as opposed to the two first propositions that were very conceptual, very different in scale because they were more architectural related, this proposition is an actual master plan that is currently under development and under coordination. And which is interesting is that it has only started a few months ago, less than a year actually, and it already has received 2 awards, and it's bringing a lot of interest and praise because it's tackling some projects that are some major developments that are going to be key to tackling the housing issue in the province and in the country, and it is by providing major developments, major density in transit, what we call transit-oriented developments, TODs, and they're very important because of their accessibility to a very important infrastructure, and because there is important investments throughout the province in improving the transportation systems and the transit, and because of the availability of land around those areas. And when these projects have existed for a while and are existing and are going to be pushed toward the next years, but when you look at them and you listen to the narrative they're carrying, is pretty much all the same. They're pedestrian friendly, they're cyclable, they're human scaled, etc. But when we look at those projects, and this is what the video was referring to, is this difference between the story they're telling and the actual physical reality of these spaces. So this is, for example, a large public space. When you get off the transit station, and your first interaction with the building is within 100 or 200 meters. And this is not always ideal for people to walk this type of distances, along with a very, very massive and disproportionate public space. This is also, for example, this is the width of typical right-of-way in TOD in Toronto, and again you can see not only the width but the amount of space that is actually given for pedestrians or for sidewalks or for cyclable. And finally, this is one of the smallest streets actually. So you can see that the width is still very significant, and even the build form is not very attractive, very monotonous. The heights the podium heights are between 8 and 10 stories, and with very little ground floor activity, and which makes it less interesting and less pleasant to practice as an urban space. So the question is, are we really putting people first? Are we really designing pedestrian-friendly, human-scaled spaces? And if so, how can we actually do it better? And so the scaling down concept basically relies on a very simple features, which are narrow streets, so creating a grid of walkable streets and what we call a safe, cyclable, walkable network throughout the site. Coupled with, because of the narrow streets, the build form is also lowered down to fit with this new dimensions. And third is the use of what we call the properly scaled social space. So for the streets, for example, again, obviously the use of car is necessary. There would be typical traditional vehicular streets, but those represent only 30% over the site, while the rest is actually car-free or car-light, and that very much limits the use of the cars within the site. When it comes to the build form, mind you, bringing the buildings down doesn't mean having less efficiency or creating less density. It's actually creating more blocks, smaller blocks, less deep, so easier to design, and actually achieving a better building coverage. So we're relying mainly on 3-4 story buildings, and of course the rest of the density is carried by the tower buildings are set back a little, that are considerably set back to limit any impact on the ground floor, on the ground streets in general. And finally, I'm just gonna stop this image. It just shows how there is a way to create very charming, very pleasant to walk, accessible for everybody, for all ages, and by using very simple and basic principles. And one thing to conclude is that these projects are extremely important, and they're going to be the future of our landscape of our cities, and it is paramount to start the discussions about TODs and how they're designed and how we can do them better. And thank you.
Thank you, Mohcine. Last but not least, our final project of the evening is titled Amygdala, and it's by student associate Emily Lensin. Congratulations. Please come and collect your award.
I saw an opportunity to analyze and look closer into what can be done or what solutions I can offer as a student, which resulted in this conceptual design, the amygdala. The idea initially came from analyzing the existing neural sensor within our temporal lobe, also called the amygdala, which processes fearful or threatening stimuli. My project, by extension, looks at establishing new places that can integrate the body and mind into a restorative environment and can support the human health and, by extension, hopefully heal the human body. This elevated pavilion, if I can call it, encourages exercise and relaxation, which optimizes the healing process through the exploration of the human senses.
Hello everyone, my name is Emily Lensin. I'm currently an undergraduate student at Toronto Metropolitan University, and this is my submission for SHIFT this year. Toronto is constantly changing its built environment, yet the city has pockets of dense urban spaces that create unsettling living or working conditions for many city dwellers. In response to the psychological stresses induced from urban density, I proposed a project that explores how an architectural form can respond to the body and the psyche. The initial idea for my proposal was to develop a design that functioned as a treatment for the human mind. Thus, it was clear that both the anatomy of the human brain and the existing environment needed to be explored to derive a connection. The proposal would become a threshold, a link that connects the needs of the human brain through the stress-reducing qualities of its design, utilizing the natural surroundings. The project could not function in a city grid, so I went out to explore outside of the urban areas until I visited Toronto's Woodbine Beach, one of the few largest beaches available to the public in the city. What caught my attention initially was the network of paths that surrounded the area and weave themselves in and out of the pockets of the existing tree canopies. The paths evoke the idea of playing around with exteriority and interiority, where it was guided by the landscape that defines our communities. Rather than thinking about a rigid enclosed domain, there was an opportunity to be more flexible and offer transitional spaces for the users to experience. For a large-scale project, movement plays a crucial role in transitioning the user between the areas defined by nature, impacting the psychological and physical well-being of the human body. By considering circulation as a component of the user's experience, the structure's design embeds therapeutic strategies through the natural biological cycles of health and wellness. My research into breathing cycles and their impact on mitigating stress and anxiety led to further analysis of the amygdala. The amygdala is a neural sensor located in the temporal lobe of the human brain, which mediates emotions and memory. Its role is to process reactions to fearful or threatening stimuli, like fear, anger, and anxiety, which can result in overwhelming emotional reactions and unhealthy stress. In understanding the amygdala's role in serving the body, the proposal is designed to mitigate stress by encouraging exercise and relaxation through a restorative environment. The amygdala, whose form is in sync with the needs of the human mind, aims to regulate health and wellness through its expressive infrastructure. The design is supported by a steel structure with a timber deck establishing a diverse network of elevated walking spaces. The pathways intertwine around the existing tree canopies without interfering with the landscape, creating a dynamic route with specific moments of expansion and confinement. The three tensile structures are incorporated along different paths of the walking route, acting as social gathering spaces. Each domain is intricately woven to provide the passage of light, wind, and views to the nearby lake, optimizing the healing process through the exploration of the human senses. The amygdala offers a new set of possibilities for utilizing architectural design as a tool for supporting human health. In an effort to challenge the unhealthy stimulation induced from urban density on the human psyche, the proposal explores how a form can primarily respond to the well-being of people rather than prioritizing economics or functionality. The result facilitates a walkway or even a pavilion, which gears its moments towards benefiting the health of the local users. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. So now that we've had an introduction to all the winning projects, we have a little bit of time to dig into the themes of architecture and health a little bit. So I'd like to invite all the SHIFT winners up on stage with me, and we'll do a little question and answer period, and hopefully we'll have some questions from the audience. There should be a few microphones running around as well, so please give them a round of applause. Everyone's comfortable?
Yep.
So you've obviously all spent a considerable amount of time thinking about this idea of this intersection of health and architecture. And in your mind, is there any thoughts or opinions on what the profession of architecture, the built environment, what architects can do to support health in Ontario and beyond? big questions first.
I'll dive in. I think there's a lot that architecture can do, because it's one thing to prescribe a medicine, it's another thing to shape a space, to create a sense of wellness. One heals, the other one creates wellness further upstream. I'm not sure if I'm really making it clear, but I think, in short, that architecture could really play an important role, because we have the ability to be able to control an environment, the amount of light, the amount of darkness, the height of the room, how much sunlight comes in, what you see when you look out of the window. And I think in many of the designs that were shared here tonight, there's a lot of that in that. And to me, that's going way upstream. That's creating a healthiness and enabling a healthiness in a person that could avoid having to resort to the technologies and the medicines that are typical to our traditional healthcare right now.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll quickly say I agree with that statement. And I think what a lot of us have implemented into our projects is being people-oriented, or having design being specifically targeting what the people need. And I think that plays a big role in health and wellness.
Actually, you kind of jumped right into where I was going to go. Is I think as designers and professionals, we have a duty to recognize the impact and empower that the spaces we create and the decisions we make about the environments we're creating have towards people's general health and well-being. And the message we convey by considering the actual impact that we're having when we're creating these spaces. And recognizing, for all the technological advances we have, for all the great ideas, the great inspiration, they are still spaces for people. And they have to be driven from that, an understanding of how it makes us feel, how it's going to make us respond, and how our behavior and our interaction in society is going to be formed by the spaces that we're creating.
I think that it's very interesting. Your project and both of your projects are about kind of taking the car out of the discussion, because I think that that's something that's destroyed a lot of our kind of sense of how we move in a space and how we participate in the public realm of the city. And both of your projects kind of question that, like where people, how do people perceive the city, and by kind of understanding the intimacy of the streets that you're proposing, or by covering that street and allowing all those people in the hospital to kind of look out and see a beautiful kind of terrain of nature is a wonderful way to kind of imagine kind of a healing environment.
I could add to that. We each, when we sat down to start the project, we said, what is driving us to do this? And we each had personal reasons, family reasons, in terms, and I think everybody at one point or another has ended up in a hospital, or you know a loved one who is. And I had two things that really made a difference, and they both involved very close family members. And when I went to spend some time in the hospital with them, I realized that there was a huge amount of passion on the behalf of all of the staff. There was human passion to make people better and to keep them well. But the spaces almost completely undid that. There was one where, one was an old building, another one was a new one. But they did the same thing. And I could see how design had failed to match the passion of the caregivers. And that just sort of struck me, boy, we have some work to do here. And by virtue of the design not providing that, I began to realize how powerful it could be if you actually did something about it.
It was interesting to see the themes of not just physical well-being, but also mental health, taking that into consideration through a lot of these projects. So, and not just sustaining health, I think, too, but also trying to improve it. So is there any thoughts on the impact of these spaces on mental health and proactively trying to keep people healthy?
If I may, I think I want to get back, and this answers your question too, about the necessity of using cars, or actually pushing away from the use of cars. And a lot of studies have shown, we all know about how the impact of using cars every day with obesity, with other health issues, like physical health issues. But there are like other studies that Nama was showing in some of the presentation, is that actually a huge impact on couples' life, on like the numbers of divorce and how they're correlated to the amount of hours you spend a day in your car, and the amount, like, your commute has a big impact on that. So yes, absolutely, this is something. And secondly, I think what was interesting, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the project, is that promoting walking pedestrian is not actually making people just walk a lot, but actually bringing things to them, breaking down the different uses and bringing them close, so the walk is pleasant and is useful, and no one wanna do 3 errands in 2 hours, like, and yeah.
What I liked about your project was this idea of breaking down that large space that you showed as an example and creating a whole bunch of intimate spaces which are kind of connected to low-rise buildings where the windows can kind of look out onto those spaces, and then people are just kind of living in that kind of the nooks and crannies that you created, as opposed to these sprawling, huge kind of, even though the first image you showed of the big plaza, I've been in that plaza, and it was kind of filled with people, but I also think that it does have that feeling, that it does feel too big, it does feel very sprawling, and I think when I was there, it was probably some weird event, because it was just a lot of people, but I think most of the time it would be empty.
Yeah, I think it was one of the really interesting things that we found when we were really diving into our project and the kind of history of human health and well-being, and how rooted in nature it truly is. And that's mental, physical, spiritual, all that came together, was kind of founded in our experience of our environments. And something I loved about the theme of kind of all of our projects was we were really putting people and understanding the environment we're in, and taking that biophilic, if you will, kind of approach towards spaces that aren't trying to control and put dominance on nature, which was a kind of a traditional in not that long ago in our architectural world, and coming back to a place where we're saying, hey, maybe Mother Nature got it right sometimes, and perhaps we should listen to her and kind of take on some of that inspiration from there.
And I think as we were talking, when we started developing some of the healing gardens, and it was just really conceptual, but there was one that was a grove of trees, and just thinking, if you had some of those small little, those little shelters underneath the trees, under the canopy of trees, and you just had the sound of the wind, I think that was something that started to click in my mind that I'd completely forgotten, and that was, the smell, sound, light and shadow, and you can get that in the landscape, and then you just insert the architecture into that. And that was sorry, it was kind of a neat moment. It was interesting. I think that was picked up in some of the presentations from the other submissions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Nature plays a huge role on our mental health and well-being. In my project, I really tried to integrate nature in as many planes as I could. So even right up that vertical realm on the facades of the building, just integrating it right into the whole project. And I think another aspect of supporting our mental health just comes down to providing flexibility in our designs. So giving users and people the options to use the spaces the way they need to and want to support their own mental health, giving them that autonomy. So for example, in my designs, I incorporated live-work units, which allows the separation between living and working. Also really important for prioritizing your mental health and getting that healthy separation, but also just allowing that workspace to be used for whatever you like, and having extensions, outdoor extensions, balcony spaces that can be transformed based on your own needs. So really just that option of flexibility to support your own mental needs, and you know yourself best. So as long as that flexibility is there, you can really fill it with whatever you need.
I will just point out, if anyone has a question, there is a microphone over there. So any audience questions, just put your hand up and we'll run a microphone over. In the meantime, I can jump in with another one. It was interesting to see the scale difference between some of these projects, from very specific sites to like whole city blocks. and some of them will scale better than others, but do you think there's any way to scale these ideas beyond their specific sites to other cities or locations?
Definitely. I think in terms of my project, because it's dealing with the adaptive reuse of a heritage building, really any community has their own heritage buildings with significance in some way, even if they don't have that official heritage status. Our buildings are important to our history and our culture. So in any community, there are strategies that you can implement to keep those buildings, and instead of just demolishing them and kind of ignoring the significance that they hold to create these new developments. So really it could be applied in any city, town, really anywhere with existing buildings, it is transmissible.
I'll add on by saying that as long as your initial concept and really thinking about what you're doing for the people when it comes to health and wellness translates into different projects, I believe that you would be able to scale it at any size. Thinking about, for example, with my project, thinking about the human senses and really emphasizing the design to incorporate or emphasize what we have and just to utilize it for our health can definitely go outside of just nature. Specifically for my project, I kind of based it only in really larger, dense natural landscapes, but perhaps there's a way to redefine and kind of relook at the city grid, such as Toronto, and thinking about, sure that there's parks and there's gardens there, but are they really playing the same role as suburban places? And how can my design change that or emphasize certain aspects of it? I think is also important.
We do have a question over here.
Perfect.
Thank you kindly, and congratulations to all of you, and thank you. A little closer, apparently, thank you. Yes, congratulations to all of you, and I know from participating in earlier shift challenges that this is a lot of work, and the passion that goes into it certainly has to be there to sustain that. I'm wondering what you're all thinking about, and I'm thinking about that image of the overscaled urban space. It seems to me, if you could comment a bit on the idea that since the 1920s, since Le Corbusier, since Brasilia, since all of this, we've asked a lot of the people that use our spaces because we ask them to move at speed. We ask them to get up every morning and be very heroic and to actually respond to that scale. And in some respects, I think it's a failing of modern architecture that we constantly stress people with the idea that you must get up in the morning and reinvent yourself and be heroic at this scale. And I'm just wondering your comment about that.
I'm just trying to frame that into a question here. How do we work with the general public to not direct them, I guess, but you don't want to inform them too much, right? But you want to guide them.
It's very interesting, and thank you for this question because it's bringing back again the idea of having new or existing development with automatically a very, very large public space. This comes from multiple reasons, and one of them is actually just parkland dedication, and it's just basic requirements and standards that are required by the city, and the only easier way to just go for it is actually to build one big block and say that you have achieved you've done your homework basically. And in terms of relationship, of daily relationship, no one wants, and as you nicely phrased that no one wants to walk through that big space every morning to go to work or to go to the subway station. Or people want somewhere where they feel safe, where they can walk without. There's also a big issue of noise attenuation that is achieved with the smaller scales in general. When you're getting away from large boulevards, from drugs, etc. But yeah, absolutely, it's absolutely not always a great idea to have these huge public spaces.
Don't you think sometimes that developers who have big projects, like huge projects at these TODs, like these transit-oriented developments, they kind of assume that with a big scale of a big project, we need a big space. And I think that what your proposal is saying is that, no, that isn't true. We can actually have intimate spaces, even within a larger project that has intensity and development. So I think that what you're talking about is this idea of, you know, the Corbusian kind of empty field with these pilotis and then these towers rising above, and there's just the relentlessness of it. And I think that that's something that I think we started to kind of erode with, you know, the whole idea of Jane Jacobs and the walkable city and all of that stuff. And I think maybe we've lost sight of it, where we get these huge projects which are mandated to be high density at transit corridors, but in the end, sometimes they're just trying to scale the size of the spaces to the size of the development, as opposed to keeping them at a kind of a human scale, which would be more kind of like what you're proposing to be more appropriate and more. I think as humans, nature is something that kind of is part of our DNA, and it makes us kind of, we want to feel enclosed by nature. I don't think we want to be in these huge kind of empty spaces that are vacuous. I think that when Toronto City Hall is amazing, it's filled with people and you're intimately close to people, but otherwise it's a bit large of a space. And I think that example that you were showing kind of alludes to that. The space that's just too large for humans, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're really seeing a conversation come out around kind of the interchangeability of the terms intensification and densification, which I think people, personally, I think they use interchangeably wrongly. And for me, I think there's a really strong difference between creating intense, oh my goodness, city living, oh, it's so hectic. I live 25,000 feet up in the sky and it takes me 20 minutes down to the floor, and then there's a huge park and I have to walk there for 20 minutes, versus increasing density in what we're talking about with these transit-oriented developments, where it's about bring it down to scale and maybe accepting that smaller spaces, that human scale. We can still achieve dense spaces for people. We can bring more people into that space, but it's comfortable. We have tons of front doors, lower rise, smaller units, plenty of front doors. We get that community experience. We're bringing people back into that space. And then we look at all those spaces that we say, we might have some big parks because those are important to us, but the space from my front door to the point when I arrive at that park is also part of that experience, part of that public realm, part of moving to that space. And I need to think about the holistic view of my town as how that's combining together into our public realm and the spaces we can use, so that we don't just have here and there, it's the space between as well.
I was going to add too that I think the pandemic has given us a huge opportunity. I was reading a magazine several months back, and it's a magazine that I usually would just look at the front cover and the back cover, and then I'd put it in recycling. It was about, you know, forecast colors and things like this, but this article really caught my attention, and it was what people need now in a space. And it talked about access to sunlight, a good orientation, good outdoor space. They talked about noises versus quietness. And I was reading this article and I went, what is this doing in this magazine? This is really fascinating, because what I caught from it was that people who normally wouldn't pay any attention to what made them happy and what made them feel better, all of a sudden, this article was saying, here are the 5 big things that everybody wants now. And I actually saw it happen when people were all of a sudden coming out and using
little tiny terraces in front of their house that they'd never used before. And all of a sudden, everyone had tried to use this outdoor space. So I guess what I'm saying is now people are becoming more aware of things that are designed, how things are designed to give them a good life. And that's our opportunity. It just sort of hit me because of the way that article had appeared in a magazine that I would never expect that to occur. So it's an enormous opportunity for us. It means people are actually waking up and going, hey, wait a minute, how my space is designed is going to actually make me feel better and reduce my stress. So there's a thought.
I wanted to bring the conversation a little bit to Sudbury, because my fascination with the city was this kind of the greenery and this garden city feel of this place. And I think maybe we can talk about that a little bit too, because I think there are some issues with kind of the suburbanization of the built environment. But there's also something wonderful about the experience that I've had in the last 2 days. I think maybe we can talk about that too, just how we can bring this back to a discussion around, not so specifically about Toronto, but about Northern Ontario and the issues that are at play in terms of how are the people here dealing with the same issues that we're talking about, but maybe we can move away from a transit-oriented hub and kind of think about how, that idea of the big space. I think when you have a garden suburb like this, you're surrounded by the intimacy of all the planting. It's just kind of coming at you, and it's wonderful because it's enclosing, and you don't get that weird feeling you get in Toronto, like at Lawrence and Finch, where you just get these sprawling cement corridors of just nothing and strip malls. And so I felt like I was getting a lot of that feeling of just the benefits of greenery in the city, and how, maybe we don't address that enough. We think of it as kind of a negative thing, as a kind of a suburban thing we don't need to talk about, but there was something really wonderful about the experience over the last 2 days and being in this city.
That's perfect. I think we're running really short on time here, and that's a nice way to end it, just with a shout out to Sudbury. So I'd just like to give these folks another round of applause. This evening. It's been fascinating to learn about the projects and the people behind the projects as well. So throughout the year, the OAA will come back to these SHIFT selections and hold a few other special events and explore them in a little more detail. So keep your eye open for some future news on the website and the OAA newsletters. And as mentioned, the books will be made available online as well. So thanks again to our sponsor, Concrete Council of Canada. Your support is greatly appreciated. And one last round of applause for the winners tonight. So just for your information, next year's conference will be held in May in Niagara Falls. Its theme will be housing and pushing the envelope. With the passing of the National Housing Strategy Act, recognizing adequate housing as a human right, the time is now for swift and thoughtful action. The OAA's 2024 conference will bring together a diverse array of architecture experts to explore innovative ideas and solutions for designing safe, inclusive, and sustainable spaces that foster community, health, and well-being. From cutting-edge technologies to regenerative building principles, and from imaginative adaptive reuse to rethought densities, we will delve into the latest trends and best practices. With a focus on addressing housing challenges in diverse communities, including homes, hospitality, and healthcare, this conference is a unique opportunity to learn, network, and contribute to the collective approach towards creating equitable and inclusive housing in Ontario and beyond. This event invites members to be part of the conversation and explore the many roles that the architectural profession and professionals can play to have a meaningful impact on the future of housing. So thank you, merci, and miigwech. I hope many of you have tickets for the event following this immediately. It'll be on the 3rd and 4th floor upstairs. You'll have full access. You'll be able to explore the human gyroscope, the racetrack, the biolab, and a few other attractions. You'll have nice views of Lake Ramsey and special wildlife guests, which that sounds pretty intriguing. So we'll see you soon, and please enjoy the rest of your night.